what they are? Okay, you're going to go to page 4.
A chief who was able to organize and direct activities and act as a focal point for the redistribution of food and other essentials within the clan. It was this form of organization and the competition and probably conflict between the clans that produced both the major achievements of Easter Island society and ultimately collapse.
MashaAllah, Halima and Khadija, you guys are excellent readers, MashaAllah. Okay, so basically what they're saying here is that because they explained to you that their growing and cultivating of their food was very simple and easy, and they had a lot of time. So then socially, the way they organize themselves is they have families, and they live in extended families. So, if you have a family and you have children, as they get married, they bring their spouses into their homes. And then what they do is those homes get bigger and bigger, and they create clans. And at the head of the clan would be a chief. And the chief would be the person who would organize things, direct activities, and the chief would be the one that would distribute the food and do that. Now, it's a competition that develops between these clans that creates the major achievements of that island, but also, in the end, it also leads to the collapse of the society. Okay? So I'm gonna go through this and finish it up. Settlements were scattered across the island in small clusters of peasant huts with crops grown in open fields. Social activities were centered around separate ceremonial centers, which were occupied for part of the year. The chief monuments were large stone platforms, similar to those found in other parts of Polynesia. Polynesia, just so you guys know, is a set of islands off the coast of Australia. Okay? Whenever they see something Polynesian, that's what they're talking about. The chief monuments were large stone platforms similar to those found in other parts of Polynesia, known as ahu, which were used for burials, ancestor worship, and to commemorate past clan chiefs. What made Easter Island different was that the crop production took very little effort, and therefore there was plenty of free time, which the clan chiefs were able to direct into some ceremonial activities. The result was the creation of the most advanced of all the Polynesian societies, and one of the most complex in the world for its limited resource base. For a place, basically, Halima and Khadija, what he's saying is, for a place that had very limited resources, you could barely grow anything there except there was like 5 fruits on this island that's in the middle of this Pacific Ocean that's warm and everything. There was so little there, yet they created such a complex society. Let's continue. The Easter Islanders engaged in elaborate rituals and monument construction. Some of the ceremonies involved recitation from the only known Polynesian form of writing called rongorongo, which was probably less a true script and more a series of mnemonic devices. That basically means it was like symbols, something like hieroglyphics. One set of elaborate rituals was based on the bird cult at Orongo, where there are the remains of 47 special houses together with numerous platforms and a series of high relief rock carvings. The crucial centers of ceremonial activities were the ahu. Over 300 of these platforms were constructed on the island, mainly near the coast. The level of intellectual achievement of at least some parts of Easter Island society can be judged by the fact that a number of these ahu have sophisticated astronomical alignments, usually towards one of the solstices or the equinox. Basically what they're saying is, you find these huge stone platforms. So these platforms are just kind of these flat, higher up, like looks like a big stair, carvings everywhere, and they're usually near the coast. And it might seem like kind of like not a very smart thing to do, but actually it was very smart, because when you look at where those platforms are on the island, they usually measure up to something with the solstice or the equinox. So that's where like the sun's position hits a certain place either in the day or during the time of the season. So it tended to line up with those kinds of things. Let's continue. At each site, they erected between 1 and 15 of the huge stone statues that survive today as a unique memorial to the vanished Easter Island society. It is these statues which took up immense amounts of peasant labor. The statues were carved using only obsidian stone tools at the quarry at Ranuraruku. A quarry is a place where you find a lot of stone that you can kind of extract. It's usually you kind of go digging. I'm sure if you've probably driven by a stone quarry before. You'll see it's like this huge dugout place where there's just a bunch of stone, and you can see like these machines and these tractors that just kind of extract the stone from there. Let's continue. They were fashioned to represent in a highly stylized form a male head and torso. The torso is basically from the waist up. On top of the head was placed a top knot of red stone weighing about 10 tons from another quarry. So that means from one quarry, they're making the head and the torso. Then from another quarry, they're going in, they're getting this over 10 tons worth of stone that was placed on top of the head, like something like a hat. Okay, and you can see it in one of those pictures. The carving was a time-consuming rather than a complex task. It wasn't so difficult as much as it was that it was taking a lot of time. The most challenging problem was to transport the statues, each some 20 feet in length and weighing several tens of tons across the island, and then to erect them on top of the ahu. So basically, they got to get these huge stone statues, and they don't have tractors, they don't have Hummers, and they don't have like these big, cars and things like that were transporting them, and they didn't have horses, they didn't have donkeys. So how were they getting these heavy statues out there, and how were they then lifting them up once they got them there? Because they weren't walking them to the different places. They were probably rolling them somehow there. So then not only do you got to roll them, but then you got to make them stand up. How are they doing this? The Easter Island solution to the problem of transport provides the key to the subsequent fate of their whole society. Lacking any draught animals, a draught animal is like a horse or a donkey, something that draws something. Okay. Lacking any draught animals, they had to rely on human power to drag the statues across the island, using tree trunks as rollers. The population of the island grew steadily from the original small group in the 5th century to about 7,000 at its peak in 1550. Over time, the number of clan groups would have increased and also competition between them. By the 16th century, hundreds of ahu had been constructed, and with them over 600 of the huge stone statues. Then, when the society was at its peak, it suddenly collapsed, leaving over half the statues only partially completed around that quarry. The cause of the collapse and the key to understanding the mysteries of Easter Island was massive environmental degradation. Degradation means ruination, to ruin it. That means there was massive ruination of the environment, brought on by the deforestation of the whole island. To deforest the island means to cut down all the trees. When the first Europeans visited the island in the 18th century, it was completely treeless, apart from a handful of isolated specimens at the bottom of the deepest extinct volcano crater of Rano Kau. That means that when the Europeans came, they barely found any trees there. However, recent scientific work involving the analysis of pollen types has shown that at the time of the initial settlement of Easter Island had a dense vegetation including extensive woods, meaning they found no trees there, but at one point it was filled with dense woods. As the population slowly increased, trees would have been cut down to provide clearings for agriculture, fuel for heating and cooking, and construction material for household goods, pole and thatch houses, and canoes for fishing. The most demanding requirement of all was the need to move the large number of enormously heavy statues to ceremonial sites around the island. The only way this could have been done was by large numbers of people guiding and sliding them along a form of flexible tracking made up of tree trunks spread on the ground between the quarry and where the ahu were constructed. That means prodigious means large quantities of timber would have been required, and in increasing amounts as the competition between the clans to erect statues grew. As a result, by 1600, the island was almost completely deforested, and statue erection was brought to halt, leaving many statues stranded at the quarry. Basically, what he's saying is that the only way they could have gotten these statues there is if they cut down all the trees steadily over time, not all at once, but over the years as they keep making these and keep competing with each other to see who can erect more and bigger and more. They had to cut down the trees so that they could lay down like a track, almost like railroad tracks, but with wood, so that they could roll these statues all over the island to the different places. And that's what they had to do that. But then what happened was that as you're cutting down these trees, new ones don't grow as quickly. So you're just left now. They're making these statues and they're rolling them, but they can't replace the trees so quickly. So almost suddenly, the tree population was just gone, and they couldn't even finish the stone statues because there was no way to transport them from where they were at to the different parts of the island. Okay, let's continue. We're almost finished. Does anyone have any questions so far? Halima and Khadija, are you guys still with me? Girls? Olivia?